Okay, so I guess a little while back I said I want to do something about the W's, the five W's: who, what, where, when, why, and then the H, which is how. And I wanted to put a whole bunch of stuff in, and I will. But I'm watching X-Men Apocalypse tonight, and I'm looking at the fact that mutants in the movie are asked to accept their powers. They're asked even to embrace them, even if they can't control them. They're asked to just embrace all of what they've been given, all of the amazingness they've been given. And it's really hard to sit here and to put that out there, especially unscripted, and to say, I have figured out a way to turn God off. Maybe it's not so much turning God off as turning off my antenna to God. Turning off the ability to receive what makes me special. It's not like I'm talking about disbelief. I'm not talking about heresy or blasphemy. I know God is out there, and I've seen him, I've felt him, I've worked with him, I've sometimes inadvertently worked against him. But what if there was a point, like in the X-Men movies, where you just didn't want to have it anymore? We see in X-Men Days of Future Past how Charles Xavier can use the formula that Hank McCoy, Beast, uses to walk again. To walk. But in order to be able to do that one thing, what does he lose? He loses his gift. I can turn God off. Or I can turn off receiving God. I can turn off the thing that makes me most special. I can do it. I've done it. I'm not really proud of saying that, but you know what? I've done it. Because there are some days I just can't bear to hear what there is to say. There are some days where I just can't stand to experience what had to turn the light on. I can't stand to experience the overwhelming power that I can. There are days when I would most gladly lock the doors and shut out the best part of my life. My hope for growth, my hope for salvation. Because on any day, in any given moment, sometimes the voice of God hurts too much. And that would be why. The voice of God, the voice of the Almighty, asks things. It asks to do things like love when there isn't any reason to love. It asks for giving care and compassion when really care and compassion are not, in the eyes of man, justified. It calls for moments of silence when we live in a world that's not in any way anymore silent. And I struggle with this. I do. I remember asking God one day, why do I have to do this? I was just days away from preaching a sermon in my home church where I had been for, at that point, like 20 some years. The people who knew me best asking, why do I have to preach a sermon about judgment? And the only answer I got was, because. And it's not easy. It's not easy to love when other people throw things in front of you. It's not easy to care when, the world is given over to passive aggressiveness. It's not easy to speak out when the overwhelming voice of the world is of entitlement, and the fact that an internet connection gives you the right to voice your views. In a lot of ways, I'm really ashamed to say that racism in the first world is alive and well. Racism within the world is a problem. And I only know one way to solve that. And lately, what I've been doing is I've been turning it off. Because guess what? That is way, way easier. There was a time when, this is, oh man, I really wish I knew. I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, 8 years ago, we had a guy who was going to seminary from our parish, and he came back to speak. And I remember asking God that night, that Sunday night, as I went to bed, when will it be my turn? That was one of the really weird times that I got an answer. I mean, I know we're all entitled to answers. I know we all get them. But whether we receive them is sometimes the main issue. Was your antenna up? Were you listening? Where were you? When were you? Why were you? Were you listening? And I got an answer. And it's an answer that I have struggled with for those 8 years. When God would even dare to say, and imagine the judgment out of my heart when I can say, when God would dare to say, you are my priest when I need a priest. And yet still, I do my very best some days, at the end of the day, when I'm most tired, when my guard is down, when really, in a lot of ways, I'm most likely to receive something, because my antenna is so strongly aligned. I do my very best to turn God off. Why do I do it? Why do we do it? I wish I had an answer. I wish I had the right answer, the most complete answer. Instead, the only answer I have is because sometimes it's easier. Because sometimes life is unscripted, things happen. But there's someone out there who has seen everything. God existing outside of time and space. These things made salvation possible. They make forgiveness possible. Maybe they make the realization of love possible. And somewhere, deep down inside of me, where there is a very human heart, somewhere deep inside my brain where there is a very human organ that functions in ways that it can, where that organ just yearns to conform. Sometimes it's easier to conform. Sometimes listening isn't hard. Hearing and then responding is difficult. Sometimes responding is so difficult that it's easier to use whatever means we need. Alcohol, drugs, obsession, any of the various self-centered ideologies, self-entitlement, racism. It's so easy to use these to turn off my responsibility to God. It's so easy for anybody, any one of you, to turn off a responsibility to what is right, to what is true. And that's the why. But what are we going to do about it? That remains to be seen. That too will probably be largely unscripted. So I say to you, cheers. I bid you blessing and lahitrioth, the biblical Hebrew for until we meet again. For I have spoken to you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.